What's going on, my YouTube friends, my audio enthusiasts, engineers, technicians, everybody, what's happening? Welcome, everyone. Today, I wanted to talk about how I approach small to medium-sized shows in a live capacity when you're mixing. There's lots of wicked information out there, and there's lots of great channels that talk about kind of large to extra large shows, and I haven't really seen a ton about how to manage and how to prepare for small and medium-sized shows, which is the majority of what a lot of us do. I think like I live in a pretty small market, and even the bigger markets around me, most of the shows are like bar shows and club shows. They're not like line arrays and multiple consoles and like pre-installed wicked sound systems, right? So a lot of the time we're dealing with small stages, lots of bleed. Maybe you're mixing monitors from front of house, which comes with its own limitations. And so I wanted to address how I try to make the most out of those shows and still deliver a quality product for what we're getting hired for. And in some cases, you know, these things get expensive when you're hiring a 5-piece band or a 4-piece band and an audio team, maybe a lighting guy. And you want to make sure that you're bringing the most amount of value possible to any size of show, right? And of course, doing big shows, line arrays, all the big shit, like all that stuff is a ton of fun. But for the day to day, it's not always what we get to see, right? So I have kind of a basic input list based on my Freeze the Fall shows that I do. And I take this approach and I bring it to all the bands that I work with. Right now, I'm specifically only working with about 3. But I thought this would be kind of fun. This video is going to be sponsored, and I could talk about that a little bit later. But let's dive into this. So the idea is that we have a whole bunch of inputs, and what are we going to do with them to make the most out of the show, right? So me personally, I always over mic. Like I'll bring all the drum mics, even if I'm only going to use 2 or 3 of them. So kick, usually I'll do 2, snare I'll do 2, hi-hats, rack 1 and floor if it's Jonah. Some drummers have 3 or 4 toms, but just for the sake of the small space in the camera, I always do overheads. I would prefer stereo overheads to a ride mic if I have the option. Like I would drop ride and hi-hat to get 2 overheads. That's just, we can talk about that another time too. But I always have 2 overheads, whether or not I use them. Bass DI, guitars left and right, any sound effects or tracks, and then your vocals, right? So the big thing is getting healthy gain stages, and I'm not going to spend time going like this is how I would set the gain or the trim depending on your situation for each input. But what I'm looking for each, so I'm looking for, in most of the drums, it's minus 12. Kick and snare for sure, 12 minus. Toms are going to be up there, minus 12. And it depends on the console, right? So like I'm imagining like an X32 or an M32 where you have limited monitor outputs if you're still doing monitors from front of house. So you can't utilize like a bunch of groups and all that kind of stuff. So just bear that stuff in mind as we move through this presentation, we'll call this. Overheads minus 18. They can get out of hand pretty quick. And bass also minus 12. And then everything else is going to be minus 18. We can just write these on here. Minus 18, minus 18, and minus 18. So your foundational stuff, kick, snare, like toms usually, they're either used in places like a hi-hat, like if you're doing like a floor tom, keep in time thing instead of hi-hat, or like a crash cymbal or a ride cymbal. But for fills, for tom fills, I like them to be real present and kind of like punchy and stand up on top of the mix. Because it's like these kind of like moments of transition or excitement or something when a drummer's doing drum fills, right? Kick and snare, you want them like pounding away, keeping time, something for people to dance to or to groove with or whatever. And that follows suit with bass. Like I like the bass to sit nice and steady in the mix and be part of the rhythm section. Obviously, like it's a bass guitar, bass player, they're part of the rhythm section, right? So minus 12 on just about everything. Hi-hats, I mean, if I'm mixing hi-hats, minus 18. And I'm pretty much just looking for the 2 all the time. On Heath consoles, you get a little bit more play. Like I find the channel strip on a Heath console, at least like in the SQ line and stuff like that, SQ5 or 6 or 7, you kind of need a little bit more out of them to just get them exciting through the preamps. But you get like an extra 4 or 5 dB before it starts to distort on a Heath console anyways. So on X32, M32, minus 12, minus 18. On a Heath console, maybe a little bit more to feel it out. The meters on the Heath consoles are kind of strange for being like a quote unquote nicer console. I do find the metering to be kind of odd. So, use your ears a little bit. But this is what I'm shooting for, like X32, M32, Yamahas, some of the Avid consoles, stuff like that. But those are usually bigger shows, right? So when it comes to grouping, there's two ways you can kind of approach this, right? So if you're doing monitors from front of house, it's going to chew into how many groups you can use. So like a band I mixed last weekend, they had 6 musicians on mixes, I want to say. It might have been 5. We'll just say 6. So I was limited on groups, right? So what I did was I still sent all the drums naturally to left and right, right? So kick, snare, hats, toms, overheads, they all went to left and right, like directly. You can just select it on the like output routing, right? But I also had a group. I had a parallel group. So what I do is I send all the shells there. So kick, snare, and toms, none of the metal, just the shells, and I send that to this group. And in this group, you can process it. It's not like a VCA or a DCA. It's an actual group with processing. So I'll do, and we can talk about this again in another video if y'all are interested in this, but I do like a cut on the EQ about 500. I do a low shelf boost and a high shelf boost, and I compress the absolute crap out of it, like 10-1. You can go higher if you want to. I like 10-1. And this is just to bleed in for like punch, right? Excitement, energy, faster songs. It kind of tightens the thing up when you're pushing that group, right? So all my shells will go to a compressed drum group as well as left and right. Follow with me? So all the metal, everything left and right, just the shells to a compressed parallel group, right? This is parallel processing now because they are still going to left and right. So you can use that as like a flavor maker, I guess, when it comes to these shows. And in some cases, you might only have, say, kick and the floor tom maybe in your mix because it's a small club or a small room, but you can bleed in like a small percentage of this compressed group just to get more like energy out of it, right? A little bit more top end, whatever, right? You can do any combination of that. You can even pull some stuff out of the group. Like if your toms aren't speaking, but the kick and the snare are good and the cymbals are good, you can basically do a parallel compressed tom group and use that in stereo on the group faders, the group page, and get a little bit more excitement out of them, right? In this kind of a situation, I would not route my drum effects, like the reverbs that I use. And if I have the availability, I'll do a snare reverb and a tom reverb. If not, just one reverb for drums is fine. I would not route that to the parallel. If I had a separate drum group, I would route that into the group instead of to left and right. But in this case, we're sending so many drums and channels to left and right already. You can just send your effects that way, right? In my experience. Bass and guitars, I don't typically do groups if I'm running monitors from front of house. So these are just going to be left, right. Sound effects, probably not. And vocals, as often as I can, I try to send them just to a group. And the group goes to left and right. So in the group, you can mix in some more processing as well, right? So if you find on each channel, like 250 is a pretty common frequency to be pulling out of like SM58s and similar vocal microphones, right? So instead of pulling it out of each vocal, each input individually, you pull it out of the group. You can process the group that way, right? Compression on the channels, I'll do individually for each channel. I always do 4-1. I do like 20 milliseconds attack, 50 to 100, depending on the vocalist and the style of music, release. And I set the threshold exactly where I want that vocal to sit. So back to that -18, right? So my threshold is -18. So anything that jumps above that, it just compresses at 4-1, right? So for every 4 dB that it goes over the threshold, over the -18, it's only going up 1 dB. So it's just kind of like smoothing things out a little bit, right? In the group processing, I'll do a 3-1. So now we have serial compression, but I set the threshold at 0. So it's only when it breaks that 0 point, which it does happen. It does honestly happen. The harder you start pushing those vocals, like if you have a lot of stage volume, guitar amps or a loud drummer or just like a tight stage, the harder you push those vocals, the more they're going to send to that group, the more they're going to push over that threshold line. So it does happen, but it's more like a fail safe and like a glue than like I'm trying to make my vocal compress a certain way, right? And with each vocalist, it's going to be a little bit different. Like I find some vocalists, when they're really dynamic, I'll change the threshold, but typically 4-1 with that attack and that release ratio is pretty safeguarded, right? Pretty safeguarded. So once again, the vocals on the actual input, the actual like input channel, I'm compressing it at 4-1. about 15 to 20 milliseconds attack, 50 to 100, depending on the vocalist, depending on the music release, and minus 18 on the thresholds. Exactly where I want that vocal to be sitting, right? And the nice thing about that, especially having it not just go straight to left and right, but going to a group, is if there's a breakdown section or a solo section or even intro, outro, and there's no vocals, you can pull back just the left, right. And if you have them paired, they'll come down together. You just pull down the one fader and they'll both go. You pull down the group and your bleed goes away, right? And then if someone goes back to sing, you just push up the group. Instead of grabbing 3, 2, 3, sometimes 5 vocals and trying to bring them all down while something else is happening, you can have your hand on the right-hand side of the console, pull the group down, and you could be pushing a guitar solo or a ride bell or a bass, like whatever's happening, you still have your left hand free for that instead of trying to grab a bunch of vocals, right? So for me, it makes it a lot smoother and a lot cleaner to have them sent to a group instead of left and right. A lot more control over it anyways. In that situation, if you are doing that, I would send my vocal effects, my reverb, and my delay. Sometimes if I have the capacity for it, I'll do lead vocal reverb, backing vocal reverb, and 2 delays. So I'll have like one that's pretty quick. Like I try to keep it on time at like 1/8 notes maybe. And then I'll have a second delay. I hope I said that for the first one. A second delay for like throws or bigger effects and stuff like that. And those I would route to the group, because the harder you push them, the more it's going to send to the verb, right? Or the delay. And so if you're pushing a fader and you're pushing and pushing, your vocals effects are going to be running away and you're going to find yourself backing those off, right? So I just send them to the group. The group kind of glues them together, keeps them in check. And like I say, when you pull that group volume down and it turns all the vocals down, it's also turning all your effects down too, right? Something to also consider on small stages is you will have a lot of bleed. Like when the vocalist walks away from that vocal mic, it's going to be a big room mic for the whole band, especially if you have like a bass amp and guitar amps on stage, right? You see a lot of bands these days using modelers, but not everyone, and that's fine. Like, to each their own. So any of that stage volume is going to be picked up on your vocal mic or through your vocal mic on these smaller stages, sometimes even on bigger stages, depending on how loud everyone is, right? And where you're set up. So when it comes to sound checking, when I'm looking for these minus 12, minus 18, and like you kind of get in a rhythm, right? Like on an X32 or an M32, vocals is like 27 to 30 dB a gain. I don't like going above 30 because I find it's just feedback city. But like you're going to find your sweet spot somewhere between like, I don't know, 23 and 28 dB, call it, of gain. And once I've set those, I basically just start asking the band to start playing songs. Like it's probably a lot easier for a performer to actually start singing and trying to get their like monitor right, trying to get my mix right, rather than them just going like check, check, purple, check, 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 like all that crap, right? So I'm distorting here a little bit, don't mind me. So I try to get them playing as early as I can. So maybe for the drums, for kick and snare, I might actually get them to do like, give me the kick a couple times, snare a couple times, toms a couple times, play the whole kit to get the overheads, and I'll set those. And then I'll basically be like, all right, just start jamming, like start working through tunes you have questions about, or just play your favorite song, whatever, right? And that's when I start my mix. So on a small stage, I start with my vocals, right? Vocals go up and they have to be up above the band. And that's kind of like where your bass line is, right? So if drums are crashing away, no mics on, they're just crashing away, small room, small stage, I'm getting my vocals above that, and then I'm building my mix around that. And what you'll find is part of your drum sound is actually coming from that vocal mic. And there's no real way of like just beating that, right? So yes, you can turn the group down, but if you bury it, it changes the sound of the drum kit because it's so close, right? So you'll find yourself turning the vocals down so it's not just all crashes and snare drum, but you probably won't be burying it to 0 because it's going to change too much. So you want to make sure that your mix is working with that, right? And that brings me to another point, which check your polarities, right? Like check your polarity on your vocal mic with the drums playing, and you'll just pick which one sounds better. I've heard stories where like vocalists can feel that something is strange when the polarity is switched in their thing and they have floor monitors. I don't know. I've never sat down and played with it and tried to see which side is which. So if a vocalist is like, hey, everything sounds good, but something feels weird, it might be that polarity switch with a floor monitor specifically. But give it a try and just make sure that you're picking whichever side sounds better, whichever one gives it more life, right? Because if your snare mic and your snare, if the snare is in the PA in the mix, if your snare mic and your vocal mic are out of phase, they're gonna fight with each other, right? So I'll start with vocals. Bring the vocals up, get them above whatever the stage volume is, like your floor noise, right? And then I'll start bringing in, like, what do I need? Like, it's usually kick drum, maybe a little bit of toms, and pretty rarely is it overheads. I still put them up because I like to have the like safety of them. Hi-hats usually not either. It's usually just kick and toms. And then bass guitars, get them up, bring them in, make sure they're sitting nice. And again, if it's loud on the floor, you might not need it. You might not need it. And there's an argument about, like, if you're panning things, or if I'm on the right side of the room and the guitar player on the left side of the room is loud, like, am I not getting the same experience? Sometimes, unfortunately, it is what it is. You can do like a pan job. Like, so if left is really loud from the house, you could pan it right and turn it up a little bit, try to match it. Sure, like, go ahead. That's where I would probably want to bring some headphones and work with some headphones, which I will selfishly move into our sponsor for that.
This video was made in part by our new partners with Westone Audio. They've been staples in the audio community over the last 50 years, providing a wide array of in-ears for any kind of need, budget, instrument of choice. Singers out there, all you singers, I know you've been loving the in-ears. Our viewers do get 10% off by using the code BEL Development 10, and that is store-wide. You can use that on any of the products. They were kind enough to send me a set of the Mach 40s from the new Mach series, which goes from the 10s all the way up to the 80s, and they fit comfortably. I can wear them for like long periods of time when I film for 3-4 hours. And I just want to thank Westone Audio for the trust and for the love and for partnering with the channel. And let's get back to the video.
So I always have my Westones on me. I'm always checking inputs with my headphones in, and because, like, the other thing is, sure, you're gonna probably sound check louder than your first set's gonna be, or like the first song of the night, depending on what you're kind of doing. But by the end of it, you might have a full mix. You might have all the drums in the PA. You might have this parallel group coming up and maybe even ripping a little bit. You might have guitars and bass pushing up into the mix at this point, right? So you want to make sure that all your inputs sound good at that point. And if you don't have the opportunity to have a semi-louder sound check, then PFL things, get them in your headphones, make sure they sound all right. And then when you bring it up, at least you'll have like a fighting chance of it not just sounding weird and goofy when you go to actually push it into left and right? So vocals, get them on top of like your floor noise, off the stage noise, whatever. Then go, like, just use your ears, use your eyes, see what the drummer's playing, and see what you need to bring in. In my experience, it's usually kick, specifically the top end of the kick, I find, and the toms. It's like, toms are just, they're this weird kind of like low mid placement that just don't seem to carry all the time. Snare, it's just like, it's loud. It's going to be the loudest thing on stage. Hi-hats are right there beside it. They're always freaking loud. So it's usually toms and kick drum. Bass guitar, yeah. Again, use your ears, but bass guitar usually. And then guitars, it depends if they have modelers. If they have modelers and there's no amps on stage, then obviously you get to play with them. You get to bring them in. And then any like sound effects or anything, those typically aren't going to be very loud. So those are going to be in your mix too, right? So, I hope that helps. I believe that's everything I wanted to cover. Minus 12 on all the drum shells, minus 18 on the metal, minus 12 on the bass, minus 18 guitars, sound effects, and vocals. This is actual like preamp level, right? Not like, I'm not saying minus 18 on your gain knob, because that would be ridiculous. I'm turning that input up until I get to these numbers, minus 12, minus 18. And if you need to, you can use the pad. Feel free to use a pad, like if it's a 20 dB drop, whatever. If you're clipping right out of the gates, pad it down, bring in some of that preamp gain. You want some of that level. And when you're checking your faders, so another important little tip is you want your faders to kind of be at a healthy resolution, right? So I try to get everything around 0. I'm just looking at like a show file that I have up here. We'll go through another time. I try to get everything around 0. So if it's like a real hot signal, you have to pad it, bring it in, gain a little bit. You turn it up, it's really loud. Trim it down, right? They use the trim, back it off, and get that fader up to a healthy spot. Because what'll happen is at the bottom of the resolution, at the lower side, minus 20, minus 30, minus 50, doubling in volume happens way faster and way less movement than it does when you're up around like minus 5, 0, like +1, whatever, right? So you want to get yourself to a spot where your fader resolution is at least above like -10, right? So that if you say push up for a guitar solo, maybe, you know, when they're chugging away on their rhythms, it's like loud enough off stage. Sure, that's fine. But when they go into a guitar solo, you have to boost it. It's going to get really loud or really quick if your fader is at the bottom, right? Or if you have a full mix, everything's coming through the mains. You have the headroom or the room or the venue where you can actually get, you know, a bit of a band mix going on. But all your faders are low, -20, -30. And then when you go to jump up for a guitar solo, it's going to leap forward like tenfold, right? Not literally, there's a math to it, but you want to have everything around that like -5, like above -10 is kind of like where you want things to live. And then your movement, like to double in volume, is a much bigger push than it is at the bottom of the fader. So work with your trims on that to get better resolution. Another trick is once you've got your -12, -18, all these set, if you need more level out of something, go to the compressor. The compressor has a gain on it as well, right? At the end of the chain. So what, like a common thought for that is if you're compressing something and you're getting like on average -3 dB of reduction, boost it up on that gain 3 dB just to make up for it, right? So the compressor is keeping everything leveled. The gain is bringing it back to the actual like perspective volume, right? So you don't, like, we use compressors so that things don't go up and down, up and down, up and down. They're kind of more like this. And then you want to make sure that your faders have a healthy resolution. You can get that just a little bit more out of that gain at the end of the compressor, right? So I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions about this. Like I say, I'm trying to do this approach for small and medium-sized shows where there's lots of bleed, lots of issues. You might not even be mixing everything into the mains, like drums and stuff, or maybe sometimes guitars. But that is a quick version of my approach to it. So I appreciate y'all, and I will see you on the next one.